In the months leading up to the November 2016 election, the intelligence community agreed that there was no intelligence that reflected that Russia was trying to hack the election in favor of either candidate. The evidence showed, the intelligence showed that, again, Russia did not have either the intent nor the capability to be able to impact the outcome of the United States election. So it was very striking when we look back again at the documents that I declassified and released that shows there was a shift in early December, the first week of December. Again, another document was produced by the intelligence community, a president's daily brief that was consistent with every other assessment that was done previously leading up to the election. Russia did not, this is after the election now, did not attempt to affect the outcome of the American election. That was never published. Hours before it would have gone into President Obama's President's Daily Brief, it was pulled by a senior level intelligence official saying that they had to pull it because they had received new guidance. The very next day, this meeting was called, a National Security Council meeting, bring together all of the senior leaders of President Obama's cabinet, and the topic that was put forward was a sensitive matter. The tasks that came out of that meeting was coming from President Obama directing the intelligence community, then Obama's ODNI director Clapper, to produce a document, to produce an intelligence assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow affected the outcome of the election that had already occurred, electing Donald Trump to the presidency.
All right, everybody. So that was ODNI Director, Office of Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, on Sunday morning show with Maria Bartiromo. That sums it up. It's what we already knew. This came from, we all know, the Clinton campaign, the McCoy law firm, Steele dossier, everything we know about it. We don't have to relive it. Okay? But this shows, based upon the documents that she has, that they portrayed the opposite of what was true. They made it up. It wasn't like a theory, an idea. The intelligence was the opposite. They went with it for political purposes on this meeting. I believe she said December 12th. Okay? Because they saw the political opportunity to use this to slow down the Trump agenda. Now, I think everything else with Michael Flynn being fired by Pence and everything came out. Now, what came out of this? What came out of this? The Mueller investigation, tens of millions of dollars. We saw a process crimes of people like Manafort who had nothing to do with any of this. Remember, Manafort was brought in because of the convention delegate fight that was going to happen, because he was the last person to really be on a convention delegate kind of fight, going back, 30 years at that point. Okay, so you have all these people that go there. How much of foreign policy was this affected? Okay, now think about the common sense. They just, Russia collusion. What was it? Everybody testified. It was public knowledge they didn't flip votes. What did they do? We know Google testified to $4,000 of some ads online. What, you think maybe you influenced one voter? If that, and this kind of nonsense happens all the time. Look at what we do in other countries. Christmas sake. There's no colluding, whatever. And anybody who believed it was absurd. Okay? We know they spied on him with the FISA documents. Okay? The FISA warrants, I should say. Okay? And all that, which was also based on it. And all the other people they spied on as well. But think about it. I mean, all these things are linked, right? You got, foreign policy affected, right? They expelled diplomats, Russian diplomats, out of the United States for this. The Russians must have been like, what are these crazy people going on? The United States like to say, this country's crazy, this country's crazy. Country in the West that's supposed to promote democracy is having the intelligence community make up a permanent government apparatus, make up intelligence to favor one person and to take down that duly elected person. Or to, at minimum, to handcuff him so he can't do anything. He's bogged down in the courts and this stupid investigation, and no one's go near him. And it affected his agenda. And that was the purpose. And they almost got him totally. Okay. But how much does this lead even to like the Ukraine war. And everything goes in there, right? Where did the impeachment for Trump in 2019 come from? A phone call from where? Ukraine. Okay, with Vindman and whatever that guy, Cacciarelli. Okay, Chiamarella, that's the name. Okay, for example. So you have all of these different, consequences that are related, right? Where was Burisma? Okay, with Hunter Biden, right? Ukraine. Okay, and this is Ukraine's biggest enemy. Who is the biggest? Russia. Who is the biggest donors to the Clinton Foundation? Out of what country? You got it. Ukraine. Okay, so do we have an intelligence apparatus? That means these people on the top also have worked with people who are not at the top. The permanent deep state, professional, regardless of who's president, these people are always in there. And they were able to get in there and also push this narrative too. With newspapers and corporate media. Okay, even Republicans bought into this at the beginning part of the year on the Hill and everything like that. I remember Schiff and Nunes would give press conferences in 2017 about this. Okay, Nunes looked interested. And then he realized it was all a joke. Okay? But you got to think about the importance of this. This is not like, oh, it happened, whatever. Okay? If a permanent structure, your top intelligence, i.e. law enforcement, intelligence community, worked against the elected president of the United States on false pretense, make up a lie, that's a problem. And because it affected them, it affected your rights as citizens who elected him because certain things of his agenda didn't get through, okay, and everything like that, okay, then you're not a constitutional republic. This is, as Tulsi says, a treasonous conspiracy. Without a doubt. They don't have the right to do this. They are paid for by the taxpayers of the United States. Okay? And they made this up. And heads need to roll. Maybe even literally on this one. Okay? Because last I checked, treason's the only the only crime listed in the United States Constitution. Okay? Because if that's what you did, right? Okay? Was it also pushed? I mean, like I said, a lot of these things are correlated, linked maybe loosely, but are linked in these events. It's not a coincidence that all this comes out of like it's Russia and Ukraine. There's a foreign policy establishment that is also driving this, okay? And the idea came up with probably because of the ties to Ukraine. And we know the Ukrainians backed Clinton. There was a whole article done, I think it was Politico, about how Ukrainians backed over the years the Clintons and then the Bidens. Okay, because their relationships in the State Department, the illegal server down in her basement in her house, and all of those things. That's what she was operating. Okay, so you can't just let this go. And this is a test for Pam Bondi. This is the test. Are you going to make the right turn? Okay, because these are a bad 6 weeks for the Trump coalition, in my opinion, with the Epstein and everything, and Iran bombing, and this Ukraine nonsense with the NATO paying for it that the countries aren't going into, which I discussed in my last video. But this is a chance to get this out here and get on front, because accountability's got to occur on this. You are not in a free country if this goes through, because it will be done again. And that shows you that you don't run the country. We, the people, do not. The institutions do, and the institutions that and the people that fund those institutions and through control and power, donors, military-industrial complex, who then fund the think tanks, and all these people run your country, particularly on foreign policy. So thought I'd start out with that. So today it's about after 4 Eastern Standard Time, July 21st, here in East Tennessee. So I thought I'd start off with that, a little Tulsi, right? All right, let's go. In some economic news here. E.J. Antoni. Americans' inflation-adjusted hourly wages in the first quarter of this year were the highest since the end of 2021, right? They dropped because of COVID, and then when people were going back to work, that number came back up. So that was really an artificial number because of the COVID crap. But it shows you during the course of the Biden administration is the first one really getting ticks up on here. Way down from the beginning of that year and also still below the pre-pandemic trend. We've got to make up a lot of lost ground. This is a trend. You keep the inflation down. You reindustrialize. You encourage factories to come back. Okay, everything from the capital investments that have been flowing in, both out and inside the United States, the expensing and the big, beautiful bill, deregulations, all this should help fuel this and get these wages up. Also, will get the wages up is the continued deportations. Limiting H-1B visas and cuts across all immigration. All right, here's another economic news. The recent moves in bond markets have reversed much of the change in Q1 so that banks now have approximately the same unrealized losses on their books as they did in Q4 of last year, almost $500 billion, right? So, bond market's going down. Always look at the bond market for more of a healthier economy because that shows, because you're buying their debt and the interest rates involved, because that's they're holding it for long terms because they're issued in different denominations, right? 4 weeks all the way to 30 years. So it's really important to the overall outlook of your economy. It's one of the reasons why the yield curve has been flat, particularly under the Biden administration, because a lot of people didn't want the demand for those long-term treasuries because of a lot of uncertainty due to our debt, geopolitical concerns, everything going on. So I mean, I don't know. This means I have to free up cash. The banks are not willing to lend as much. These are usually the consequences for these kind of actions when they're sitting on all these losses. The only way to neutralize it is you hold these bonds to maturity, and then it doesn't matter. But it's something that we'll keep an eye on and so forth. See, and then remember, like the stock market's economic indicating too, but you got to remember that it is it will be affected by inflation. So the assets will go up with inflation. Stocks have always been a historic hedge against inflation. Okay, while I think bond market is more truer to the fundamental health of your economy. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, Eric Doherty, Justin, we're going to flood the zone. Border czar Tom Homan is on a mission vowing to flood blue sanctuary cities with immigration raids. Time to triple down. So sanctuary cities get exactly what they don't want. More agents in the community and more agents in the worksite. I'll say it again. Sanctuary cities are sanctuaries for criminals. And I'm going to work very hard for Secretary Noem to keep President Trump's promise and his commitment several weeks ago that sanctuary cities are now our priority. We're going to flood the zone. You don't want to let us in the jail to arrest the bad guy in the safety and security of a jail. You want to release him into the street, which makes it unsafe for the community, makes it unsafe for the officer, makes it unsafe for the inmate. Okay, so that's what they're going to do. Now you got the money from the BBB coming in. You're going to be able to do that, hire ICE agents. You can shift other agents around. A lot of things you can do. But because these people are going to, many of them are going to flood, particularly the criminal ones, are going to flood into the blue areas that they know they're getting protected. So if you really flood that zone and really target those areas while doing other things like encouraging self-deportations, go after employers, then they'll have nowhere else to go. They're not going to go to a red county. They're not going to go here. Maybe they'll get lucky at a Tyson food meat plant in Arkansas or something. But by doing this and targeting these key areas, you make it harder for them to stay. You also send a message to the sanctuary cities, especially if something goes wrong and any of these agents get hurt or something like that. So I think they should continue. And absolutely, the more deportations, the better it is for the American citizen. End of story. Of all stripes, walks of life, classes, etc. And it's a safety issue. Yes, and I do believe we should target the known criminals first, without a doubt, because they're more of the immediate threat. But they all have broken the law and are here illegally. Now, you can argue some of them are here because Biden let them in. That's not their fault, okay? But that's not the point. You don't wait 7 years for an asylum claim. You go to the nearest country that you won't be killed in if you have an actual asylum. These people do not have an asylum. 20 million people from 150 countries didn't just here. Many here flew here from other continents, paid for by the United States taxpayer. So, I think it's very important that Homan continues these deportations and really targeting these sanctuary cities, okay? Because if you can go right into the hornet's nest, where are they going to go, right? Where are they going to go? So it'll be harder and harder. And then I think a lot of people will be like, I might as well just go, And I think that's what you want. So it's not an American issue. If you have watched my videos before, you know that it is a key element all throughout Western civilization. We've seen protests in Ireland, France, the rise of populist parties, but over the weekend, big thing. Massive protests from Peter, Sweden. Yesterday, the Polish protested many cities over against open borders agenda. Yet there was barely anything in the news about it. Okay? But you can see the massive protests. Okay, the video. That's just one picture of it. All right? What do we got going on here? The Telegraph, United Kingdom. Protesters clash with police outside Essex Migrant Hotel, County Essex. Demonstration took place in the wake of an Ethiopian asylum seeker allegedly sexually assaulting a teenage girl in Epping. It's because they're sick of it. This keeps happening. You even have Starmer announcing he's going launching a pseudo investigation into the grooming gangs and everything in these cultures. So they let in so many people from these areas. They're in their own culture. They're not assimilating. They're forcing the native people to adapt to them. That's not how it works. You want to move to England, become Englishmen. You want to move to Scotland, become Scotsmen. You want to move to Germany, become Germany. You want to move to Japan, become Japanese. Okay, so this is what's going on. And there's massive crime. And they view it as if you do anything about it, you're racist. And that's an insane view. They're purposely putting their populations at risk. They're hurting their wages. They're hurting their communities. They're putting strains on public services purposely for an ideological cause to dilute the national sovereignty so these globalists can implement their whole globalist left-wing ideology, while at the same time getting free, cheap labor. All right? Speaking of immigration, if you don't know, there was an election yesterday in Japan. So here's the election results. There are 3 seats undecided as of this last video I checked. Okay, and it shows the decline. So the ones with the triple digits there, the Liberal Democratic Party, that is a center-right party, pro-business. They've been in power since basically World War II. Okay, but there have been new parties coming on the landscape. They're in a coalition, okay, and they lost their coalition mandate in the lower house last autumn, and now this is the upper house. They lost it as well. They do not have enough. They will go down to 100 seats. Now, okay, Conservative Party of Japan gains 2 seats. That is a right-wing populist party. Sanseito on the bottom. They had 1 seat. They had 14 seats, a gain of 13. They ran on Japan first. What is the key issue for them? Immigration. Why? Because they have let in, they now have over 400,000 Muslim immigrants in their country. Japan has always been historically a very closed type of society when it comes to that. So they're getting pushback on that. Then there are other issues, geopolitical issues, what's going on. I'm sure BRICS, tariffs, all coming into play into their populist, because while there are very similarities between these populist movements throughout the West, there's also unique nuances to each nation. Okay, but that's good. And you've also seen in other a couple other conservative parties gain seats here. So this is going to be really interesting. The Prime Minister says he will stay in power, I guess, with the minority not stepping down because there's some major issues going on. But we'll see how that works if he stays in power. Maybe calls another snap election for the lower house or something to that effect. But again, another surprising populist right victory now coming to Japan as well. Leaving not just in Europe now, we're spreading to Japan, which is good. It's a reaction to this globalist system, this post-war globalist system. And Japan also, like I said, they've had some economic issues going back to their lost decade and everything like that. So thought I'd share that with you. Now a little Ukraine war update. So this is up here in the Donetsk region towards the north. Okay. So near Konstantinovka, the Ukrainian armed forces southwestern flank in the Stepanovka area has also started to collapse. And simultaneously, there are signs of a breach in the defense near Klebenbek and Katerinovka. Gradually, Konstantinovka, as previously anticipated, is being encircled. So that's in the northern Donetsk. So after Konstantinovka, it opens up, and then you have Slavyansk, the start of basically the 2014 war after the Maidan coup, because that's where the protests started in the east, which led to Luhansk and Donetsk declaring independence from Ukraine in 2014. So if Konstantinovka falls, Kramatorsk and Liman are it after that. I meant Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and that's pretty much it for the rest of the northern Donetsk. Now, these are just small areas, maps supporting that, where they're showing you the key areas mentioned in that paragraph. The new red is new acquired territories by the Russians. So, this is the north. Now, I'd mentioned Volchansk in my other video in Kharkiv. They seem to be really putting the pressure on there now. They've crossed the Volchaya River, and they're on the left bank of that river, the Russians as well, establishing a bridgehead. They're putting pressure on 3 different directions. So this is an increased heavy pressure that they've put on in this northern area of Kharkiv. This is, I think, the second largest city in the Kharkov Oblast. It's on the west. It's west from the city of Kharkov, which is east of this map. Okay, so yeah, so basically that they still have the same pressure in Sumy, and they started launching Operation Zaporozhye. Dnipro-Pokrovsk, which is again not one of the original 4. That's to the north of Zaporozhye, northwest of Donetsk, south of like the Pokrovsk region, southwest of the Pokrovsk region. They're launching operations there, and Kherson in the far west. All right. But come on. Getting a little spotty in there. There we go. And this is a situation, up-to-date map as this morning of Pokrovsk. This is southern Donetsk. Now you see how they're encircling it, encircling it, encircling it? All right, Rickards on the War Room this morning was talking about this. Now, this little city, Radyaninske, I think it's like a little bit bigger than a village, like a town we'll call it, but it's directly north of Pokrovsk. Russians are putting pressure on it. If they take that, then it's full encirclement. There's no other city to go to from Pokrovsk. As you can see, there's just one little village to the north of it, Merntrad, okay? And then that's it. And those are the 2 highways in and out of Pokrovsk. Other than that, it's just open land. Okay, it's open land. So where they're going to pull out. And once Pokrovsk falls, then they go, it's all of Donetsk, then they're right into Dnipro-Petrovsk. Okay, it's not even about, and then they'll focus on the rest of Kherson and Zaporozhye, and then they'll get very close to all 4. Because it really opens up to the Dnieper River at that point. All right? That's why, this Ukraine deal that Trump did with NATO and everything, it's just, maybe he did it purposely as a way to possibly, I don't know, like delay because they know the inevitable is coming, get them to the looks like they're doing something for appeasement purposes. Meanwhile, in that 50 days, let Pokrovsk fall, let this, and then Ukraine will be in such a bad position that they'll want to make the deal in those 50 days. I have no idea, but those are possibilities. But, that's why this NATO weapons thing, Italy's not doing it, France isn't doing it, Spain's not doing it. So I don't even know what that is. It sounds like more an appeasement the more I hear about it, because it's not even going to get there in time. And what they're talking about is so minimal. At least immediately, those 10 interceptors, or was it 17 or 10? I forget the number. But that's going to have minimal impact. Meanwhile, every night, strikes from Russia. Warehouses, industrial centers, anything that can be stored. And they get the intelligence. I mean, whatever. I also heard that basically all of America's M1 Abrams tanks are gone. I think there are 4 left that Ukraine has in reserve. So out of the 31, there's only 27 have been completely destroyed. All right, because that was one of the best MBTs that they received. Same thing with the British Challengers. They're all gone too. So, but their problem is the manpower. So if they don't have the manpower issue, like I showed in my last video with the press gangs, what's going to happen here? So this is a lost cause. You want to wrap it up. How do you wrap it up? You pull the support. We are funding their government. We are funding them with weapons. Europe does not have anything else to send. We barely do. Okay? And they're going to go to the Dnieper River. So cut off the Ukrainians and force them to the table and rush and agree to the Russia's demands, going what they've been the entire time, right? The oblasts, no NATO in the Constitution, and they're going to have to hold elections and clear out the ultranationalists from their government. And that's it. And then there'll be something left of Ukraine. If not, And if they're going to take the Dnieper River, they're going to take Odessa because it's not the mouth. It's it's right there. They're not going to have a Ukrainian city right up against their border like that. Whatever, because whatever's left of Ukraine will probably then end up in NATO because the war will be over, it's a frozen conflict, and then they know they're gonna have NATO on their door at that point. So they might as well take Odessa and Kiev, and probably Kiev as well. So if you want to save that and you want to do this instead of going down this road, be the peace candidate, Trump, that you said you were going to be, get these people that you've lost in the last 6 months back into your coalition, these voters you lost over the Epstein files, the Iran bombing, and do this. But yeah, if you're going to piss off the Lindsey Grahams, who are not popular, those Foxconn voters are going to vote for the Republican candidate regardless, okay? But you're going to lose these voters, which will lead to wipeout in the midterms unless you reverse. And this would be a good way to reverse it. Get this. Allow Russia to just do what it's doing, and pull the plug and put the pressure on Ukraine and end the war. So anyway, that's my video for today. So I'll be keeping an eye on the fronts in Ukraine. See what continues with the Japanese elections. I'm going to start looking at the European elections coming up this fall soon. Also, I've been keeping an eye on polling data with Trump, the strong disapprovals, these voters that he's kind of lost, certain types of independents. Robert Barnes said he lost 27% of a specific group of independents. I forgot which one. And I've been doing that. And it's these issues, okay, that he kind of walked away from a little bit on here. And it's the people around him, in my opinion. Okay, he spoke, Colonel McGregor says that, like, from what he understands is that Trump is extremely susceptible to the most recent person he spoke to. So I got to make sure he spoke to him. I hear great things about J.D. Vance behind the scenes. Obviously, Tulsi has been right behind the scenes on the issues, and dropping these documents are good. We'll keep it on and see what Pam Bondi does with these things. If there's grand jury, just get a grand jury going. Start making them panic and lawyering up. And then they'll be forced to cover it in the mainstream, and those voters will actually see what happened. And maybe they too will get scared when they have an intelligence community dictating things inside the White House and going after a sitting president with lies. Okay, maybe they'll get scared and realize that it's not Trump that's the bad guy, it's them. All right. So we'll see if Bondi can do the right thing on that. Keep an eye out for some more economic news that might come out as well. Tariffs coming in. We have some deadlines coming in. And keep an eye on these protests that keep going on. They were in Spain too. It was the weekend before. Crazy. And it's still the same issues. It's just the same thing. It's globalists. Think about it. Globalists. They're in Europe. All right. So anyway, have a great week. I'll probably put out a video later in the week. I'll be on my X, which is at Patriot Planner 1, and then on my Getter at Patriot Planner. All right, so please follow, like, and share the video. I really appreciate it, and until the end of the week.